Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Optimizing Your Success. Today, we have my friend and fellow author of The New Chameleons, Dr. Michael Solomon, who is an expert in consumer behavior. And I'm really curious to hear about this subject because people are changing and the way we are consuming things is changing and the way marketing is done is certainly changing. I often laugh that I went to business school in the early 90s before we had social media. So I am curious, really curious to hear about all of this and engagement and how that might impact our behavior. Before we get to that, I would really love for my panel of high achievers to introduce themselves so we can really, really get this discussion going. Starting with someone that many of you haven't met before, Tina Parker.
Hi, everybody. As Ruth said, my name is Tina Parker. I am the Chief Marketing Officer for the Mentor Project. I'm also CEO and founder of a transformational coaching company called Lead Outside the Lines and a Lieutenant Colonel in the Air Force Reserve. So, in my free time, I don't actually know what I do. But I'm very excited to be here with you guys. Thank you for the invite, Ruth, and this is going to be wonderful.
Thank you, and thank you for your service, Tina. We always appreciate it. Thank you. Dr. Allison Escalante, good to have you back.
Yeah, I really missed you guys. I'm so glad to be here this week. I am a pediatrician, and I'm on a mission to make it in the epidemic of anxiety that's driving us to perfectionism in parenting and in our professional lives. I read about this for Forbes and Psychology Today, and I've been hard at work on that subject in the last couple of weeks.
Thank you, Allison. We're looking forward to hearing more when you're ready. We're having a little bit of problems with the sound today, so please bear with us. Dr. Bruce Y. Lee, congrats on the new haircut.
Thank you. It was a long time coming. So happy to be here as always, Ruth. Today I am celebrating National Paper Bag Day, so hence the paper bag. So it's also National Simplicity Day, but I didn't know what to do with that because, how can you be simple? But I'm a professor, I'm a writer, journalist, and computer modeler.
Thank you. So I am always excited by Bruce's articles. So I write for Forbes as well, but no one can have the comedic writing and timing like Bruce does. So especially when he handles tough topics like COVID. So thanks for that. And for those of you who follow us every week, you know that we give Bruce a challenge every week, that when a word comes up in our discussion today, we challenge him to put it in a future Forbes article. So if you have ideas, put it in the chat. Michael Solomon, it is all you now. Tell us about you. Hey. Tell us your story. And please tell us the catalyst for this book.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for letting me join this august group. And I guess Forbes is the place to be. I write for them as well, but
there you go.
Not very funny. But anyway, well, what can I tell you? I'm currently I'm professor of marketing at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, where I'm coming to you live. And I have been, I'm a social psychologist by training. I've been studying consumer behavior for, I hate to say it, about 40 years. I write textbooks on consumer behavior and marketing, and I'm a speaker, but I also work with companies to help them become more consumer centric and try to understand what's going on inside their consumers' heads, which has never been easy, and it certainly isn't easy now.
It certainly isn't. So Michael and I know each other because we have the same publisher for our book, Kogan Page, and we were working with the same incredible editor, Kathy Sweeney.
Right.
And fun fact, we both first wrote a textbook and now are writing a book for a popular audience. But I know that writing a textbook and writing for a popular audience are two completely different skill sets. Tell me how you did the switch, and tell me how you found the voice, and tell me how you got interested in this topic.
Yeah, well, first of all, I've been a textbook author for many, many years, and you're right. It's a huge. First of all, it was a huge transition away from academic writing into textbook writing And I've frequently been accused by colleagues, in journal article reviews of being way too conversational. I once got the criticism, not making this up, we can't publish this article because it's too easy to read in a journal. That's true. So that, making that switch was really, it's really a challenge, as you know, Ruth, to take what can be a rather complicated idea and put it into maybe a paragraph that a 20-year-old is actually going to read. So, that was quite a transition for me. And then getting in and writing a trade book was actually a lot easier, to be honest. For one, I didn't have to answer to any reviewers, which was very nice.
Yes.
And I could kind of do my own thing. So I had a tremendous amount of fun with this book, but it is on a very serious topic. And, I call the book The New Chameleons. And the reason I use that title is that, as I think you all know, chameleons are these little lizards that change their colors very frequently in response to what's going on in the environment. And even I've been told, and they feel moods, and if they feel happy, they'll change their color and so on. So I'm not saying that consumers are changing colors, but what I'm saying is that we are changing our identities very, very quickly. And so, in the old days, maybe 10 or 20 years ago, or Ruth, when you were in business school, it was fairly easy to just talk about big blocks of consumers as if they were very homogeneous. Once we put a label on you, like you're an upscale woman living in an urban area, let's say, well, that's a market segment. So everybody who corresponds to that description is going to get pretty much the same kind of marketing messages and products and so on. And I think when we fast forward to today, we're observing, I write in the book about a lot of disruptions that are really radically transforming the way consumers relate to companies and to brands and to one another. And the short story is that cookie cutter approach really doesn't work anymore, because now more than ever, each of us is an individual and really wants to be an individual. And so marketers have to really scramble to really personalize the kinds of messages and products that they're going to put out there. It's funny, just today I saw a commercial, a video by the singer Dua Lipa. Maybe, I don't even know if I'm saying her name right. She's very popular. Today she was doing a video for a beverage. And the theme of the advertising campaign is because no one is just one flavor. And so the idea is you can experiment with lots of different flavors. And I glommed onto that because that's basically the message of the book, that these time-worn categories that we've used and thinking that we understand people, a lot of basic dichotomies that we take for granted. One of those, for example, is male versus female. We're used to thinking in terms of these, you're either one or the other. And of course, as we know today, for many people, that is definitely not the case. It's more of a continuum. And so what I do in the book is to identify a series of these basic dichotomies that we rely upon all the time, and show why they no longer apply in what we call a postmodern society, where these strict boundaries and categories and labels and all that really aren't very helpful.
So what are these dichotomies that you're talking about, and how did we really put people into buckets, and how should we be looking at it instead now?
Well, we've always put people into buckets because we never had a way to deal with each customer individually, other than if, let's say, you're a storekeeper and your local customers, but because we're dealing with thousands or even millions of people at a time, we didn't have the technology to customize anything really. And so today we do. And what that means is that just knowing that somebody, let's say two people share certain demographic characteristics that, as I was saying, they're both female, they're both 38 years old, they both live in New York City, what have you, doesn't necessarily imply that they're going to have the same pattern of preferences. And so that, just putting people into, and this is a very common practice in marketing. If we had more time, I'd give you a lecture on the origins of market segmentation. I'll give you a hint. General Motors invented it when they came up with different car divisions for different kinds of people.
You're bringing back memories from business school,
Michael. Yeah, but still each of those divisions, you might have millions of people that are getting the same message about a Chevrolet, and that's not going to work today. So there are a lot of these dichotomies that I talk about. I mentioned male versus female. Let's see, producer versus consumer. That's a very interesting one. I think a lot of your listeners can relate to this. The reality is that today, many of us, probably most of us, are not just content consumers. When we're consuming social media and so on, we're actually content creators. And some of the biggest disruptions in business have come about because this dichotomy doesn't apply anymore. So, for example, when we talk about the gig economy, when we talk about ordinary people who used to just be people who bought stuff, are now involved in the process of making and selling stuff. So whether you are an Uber driver or you're renting out your house to Airbnb, or maybe you work for a direct selling company like Mary Kay, or maybe you're submitting ideas for new products to companies, which companies get all the time. And the problem is they usually ignore them. And this is one of the biggest marketing mistakes, I think, of all time, because as more and more of us become more proactive in the whole marketing relationship, the best source of ideas actually are your customers. And most companies haven't figured that out. Some have definitely figured it out, like Lego, for example. Lego was almost bankrupt, but they've rebounded today, are very, very successful, and largely because they have a community of about 10,000 or so people who are avid Lego fans, and they actually submit ideas for new Lego products. So,
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah,
and you know that, and the thing with Lego, which is so interesting, it's something for kids, but they actually really got the spectrum of ages, right? From kids, and if you watch, there's some show now, some competition where these adults are competing with Lego. Right. So they really got
right. And again, and there's a great example. This line between the makers and the users is obliterated, and everyday people are competing against the companies. Everyday people are posting, I don't have to tell anybody this, they're posting blogs, they're doing podcasts, they're weighing in with their opinions. And so what we call Internet 2.0 refers to this period, after the original Internet, which was just one direction, really. Now it's a two-way street, and that probably is the single biggest development in marketing, I would say, in the last 20 years. And so in the book,
let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you had asked me about all the other dichotomies, and there are others I talk about in the book, like our body versus computers, and online versus offline, no longer a distinction that makes sense, and many others. Yeah.
So this is fascinating to me because, as I said, I went to business school before there was social media. There was barely internet. I think we had intranet. And we learned, I don't know if this still exists, the golden rule of 7. I don't know if they still teach that in business school today, where people need to hear your name around a specific topic 7 times before it resonates. But now I wonder, because of all this fluidity and because we now have all these other platforms for marketing, and the fact that the marketing is bi-directional, how has that changed that golden rule of 7?
Well, it's hard to say. To be honest with you, I'm not sure that was ever really valid. but certainly we know that it takes more than one exposure. It takes, usually the rule of thumb is 3 exposures. But that begs the question of whether people, just because you're put in front of somebody doesn't mean they actually notice you. And so the biggest problem today, relative to your question, is not, the challenge is not creating some super sexy advertising campaign and all that. The single biggest challenge anyone has today, and this is true for personal brands as well as, all other brands, is very simple: getting noticed. Because there's so much competition for our eyeballs. Some people actually call it an eyeball economy that we live in, because the competition is not so much for dollars as it is for attention, for getting consumers just to look up long enough to see what you need to say. And that's true when you're branding yourself as well, in line with the good work that you guys are doing. Just getting noticed, and I don't know what that means. Maybe it means printing a resume on pink paper instead of white. It can be something small like that, but you've got to do something.
The Elwood and all of that.
Do something to stand out. And if that's half the battle right there, and I can tell you pretty confidently that the large majority of people or organizations that want to get noticed will not succeed. There's just too much competition, and the way our brains are wired, we don't have the capacity to actually pay attention to all of these different things at a time. So our brains kind of are, I won't say they're lazy, but they like to be efficient, and they like to just just focus in on a few things and try to make sense of those. So, it's the wild, wild west out there with social media. And it's true that the more you jump up and down, the more you will get noticed.
So what do you think is the solution, the low-hanging fruit for this?
Well, the low-hanging fruit is related to what I said before, and that is customizing wherever possible your messages. Whether you customize them one-on-one, or whether it's smaller groups that you are working with, or whether you're working with a CRM, a customer relationship management system. Some of your listeners know what those are. That's the kind of thing that can tell you, oh, Tina's got a birthday coming up next week, and I'm going to send her a personalized email. Now, Tina probably may or may not know that was generated by a computer. I hate to burst your bubble there, Tina, but it does feel better, right? It does feel better if you feel like, they use your name at the beginning. And so the way to get noticed is to demonstrate relevance, to show that something about the other person's needs. You're not just cold calling out of the blue. If you're prospecting for jobs, for example, to show the potential employer that you actually know something about the company, as opposed to saying, a form letter, I'd love to work for company X, and you write that to 100 companies. That's just not going to cut it anymore. So that's the low-hanging fruit, is just treating each person as an individual, which is how they want to be treated. It sounds so simple. But it's not easy. No, it's not easy. And why is it not easy? It's not easy because it's more expensive, at least now. It's technologically possible, whereas 20 years ago it was not really. And as I was saying, that's why all of this started. And when we started to have computers, large-scale computers back in the 1960s and 70s, that totally changed the practice of marketing. Not for the better, I personally don't think, but it changed it to become much more numerically data-driven, as opposed to digging in to an individual's unique characteristics. But the fact is that before, at least until now, it was really the only option that you had, because you're not able to talk to every single customer if you just have a website, or if you're running a TV campaign or something like that. But as I say, today we do have, or we're getting very close to that technology, especially with artificial intelligence, as we can start to evolve the messages that we send to people. Now, having said that, there is an ethical downside that worries me, because that's where you get into privacy issues when we start tracking people. But the reality is, for better or worse, as you all I'm sure know, and most of your listeners hopefully know, Today, your behavior is being tracked to a degree that would blow you away if you knew how much information some companies have on every one of us.
Okay, now you're getting me scared. So
there's a good reason for it, though. There's a good reason for it, and that is that it does, if you don't abuse it, what it means is that, Ruth, you're not, or Bruce, even better, you're not going to get a message about being bald because you just got this great haircut. I don't know what you look like before, kind of scary, but
he looks like he was in the Partridge Family.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
So
we needed the flip.
So he's not going to get bombarded with ad messages about, baldness treatments. And Ruth, you're not going to get bombarded with messages for, I don't know, men's cologne. I mean, you're going to get messages that are tailored to what you're looking for. But the trade-off, there's a trade-off between efficiency and invasiveness. And our society has not yet found the common ground yet, but that's where we need to go.
Yeah, you're right about the targeting. I once got a message, someone saying, I'm contacting you because of super gonorrhea, because I had written a article about super gonorrhea. So I'm glad I identified with super gonorrhea.
Bruce, if someone just takes a snippet of the conversation, that's going to be.
Just check your inbox tomorrow. Wait and see what you get tomorrow.
He writes all sorts of, and Bruce understands, and I fully understand as well what you said earlier on when you were talking about a textbook and academic articles versus the lay press. Yes, the reviewers and being taken seriously, we get that, because Bruce and I have had many conversations on that topic. But going back to the marketing, so from the company's perspective, if you were Starbucks, or if you were, say, Tina has a small women's owned independent coaching practice, right? What are some of the strategic things that they can do? So Starbucks can track all of my skinny latte with a splash of whatever, right? And the size, they can track all that because they're Starbucks.
Right.
But if Tina's running a coaching practice, right, which is not yet an empire, it will be one day. What are some of the things that they can do to both at the Tina level and the Starbucks level to hit on these things and make sure we're getting the chameleons wherever they are?
Well, first and foremost, the number one rule is know your customer. And that sounds like a no-brainer, but a lot of times, and I've had this experience with very large companies, what you find is that when you ask people to describe their most loyal customer, they'll usually give you a description of the customer they want to have rather than the customer they actually have. And what that means is they haven't really bothered to kind of verify their hunches by actually looking at the characteristics of their heavy users. A heavy user is someone who buys the product frequently, not someone who's overweight. So what you want to do, the first thing that you can do, whether you're big or small, is get a better sense of who is your most likely customer, and then find more people like that. So, we have in business, in marketing, we have something called the 80-20 rule. It has other applications in economics and management. In marketing, what it generally means is that 80% of your revenues are accounted for by 20% of your customer. That's not set in stone, okay? But what it means is that when you look at your revenues, you'll see that a very large proportion of them are coming from a small group of people who are heavy users. In other words, they keep coming back to you. Now, if you don't have any of those people, we're talking about a different issue, but you probably do. It may be only, in Tina's case, it may be 2 or 3 clients or even 1 client. But what you want to do is isolate the characteristics of that heavy user And of course, Starbucks has, as you implied, they have different tools to do that, but just, a small business owner can do this. And in the old days, they did it all the time. You walked into the general store, everybody knew you. They knew exactly what you liked, what you didn't like, when your birthday was. They didn't have to look in a database. So you want to kind of scale that up to the extent that you can. And then then you can create what a lot of businesses are doing today, is they're creating what's called a customer persona, sometimes called an avatar, which is a fairly detailed description of what that ideal customer is like, what he or she does, how they spend their time, what they like to buy, blah, blah, blah. And so if I'm able to come up with that person, then, for example, if I'm somebody like Tina, Tina, I don't know if if you advertise at all, but for example, if you're going to do, let's say, a Facebook advertising campaign, which is well within reach for small business people, you can do what's called a mirror campaign. And what you do is you give Facebook, you feed into Facebook the data that you have. In other words, this is the type of person I want to target. She's 30 years old. It's like the segmentation I was talking about. She has these characteristics. And so when you talk about low-hanging fruit, it seems to me that if you've got a set of customers that are absolutely wild for what you do, it's not going to be everybody, but that's who you want to clone. And that's the way you clone them. So there's different ways to clone them, but the first thing is just to figure out who they are, and also to figure out internally, if you have a team, if you have other employees, it's interesting to see what everyone thinks is their customer, because you'll often find that even employees in the same organization are not synced in terms of who they think they're selling to. So probably the first step is to get your internal house in order in terms of everybody get buying into who is that ideal coaching client. What are their characteristics, and maybe it's what type of business they're in, how many years they've been in. I'm sure you have other things. Once you figure that out and agree on it internally, then you can go after those people, and hopefully you'll be doing more research, which can just be walking around and seeing how people use your products. In some cases, a lot of companies don't even do that. And that gives you a place to start. That doesn't mean that's the only kind of person that's going to buy your product. But if you can clone people who are avidly buying your product or service now, and if that cloned group isn't falling for what you're doing, there's something really wrong, because they're the most likely of anyone to be added to your customer base. So know thy customer.
What I love about this show is that I always have to have, paper and pen with me, because I'm always learning something new. So I am sitting here as you're talking, Michael, and I'm scribbling notes, trying to take it all in. Tina, I was wondering, because I'm sorry, I put you on the spot. I hope that's okay. Yeah. But I'm so excited about your new coaching practice. Do you have questions that you wanted to ask Michael, or you're from a marketing background? Is there something that you wanted to add into this conversation?
Or tell me I'm wrong.
No, absolutely not. In fact, I love what you said earlier, not on the show, but I've read it before, where you said people don't buy the product that you sell for what it does. They buy it for what it means to them.
Absolutely.
And I love that, because it speaks directly to what you're saying, is really understand your avatar, that core person who's going to utilize what you're offering, and really understand what it means to them. So I guess that goes back to also when you're saying there's so much noise out there, and getting noticed is the hardest part. I'm wondering what your perspective is on just being really genuine and authentic and connecting with those people rather than trying to sell to them, because there is a connotation around that. So I'm just wondering what your perspective is.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly, authenticity is one of the most important product attributes today. And this was true before the pandemic. It's especially true after the pandemic, especially when you do research with younger consumers. What you find is that they are the most focused on authentic brands. But the question is, what does authentic mean? And there are different ways to put that into practice. So in theory, absolutely, you don't want to start, you don't want to meet someone and immediately start to sell them. I mean, that's why we have sales funnels. That's why we have so-called relationship marketing, where you build up a relationship and then you're able to do these transactional things. The problem is that too many marketing executives have read somewhere that it's really important to be authentic, and they go out of their way to act authentic. And
it's not authentic.
Interesting paradox, right? If you have to, if you have to act authentic, if you have to tell people, we're a national treasure, we've been here for 100 years, that really tends to erode your credibility. And during the pandemic, what happened was that, every company almost was pivoting to say, we don't care so much about what we make in normal times. We care about our community and giving back. The problem is that consumers have a BS detector that goes off very easily. And in many cases, they can see that they are talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk. And that, I guarantee you, is going to come back to bite them when things get really settled back to normal, because everybody is so sick of seeing these videos of all these, suddenly every company is so caring and values driven. Like, where did this come from? I mean, 2 years ago, they weren't. Some of them were, so if you have, like, say, a company like Patagonia, and by the way, I'm not getting a commission, but they have a set of values that they've had for a long time, and they haven't changed those values. They may change the products that express those values, but a lot of other companies, are really new to this whole social responsibility game, and not to say that they shouldn't be doing it, but you better make sure that you can back it up and that you're really doing this stuff. And so that's what authenticity is saying what you stand for and doing what you stand for.
So it's not a good idea to fake authenticity.
I wouldn't recommend it, but that's the dominant marketing strategy today, is they are faking it. And I think they're kind of tone deaf about it. It's better to say nothing than to take a stand on some social issue, like, say, racial inequality or something, but not to alter anything that you do about it.
And those are the commercials that are cringeworthy, that actually turn you off the product.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very counterproductive. Now, when a company takes a stand and really, puts it on the line, it can actually be a very financially, it can be a very, very good thing for them to do. Nike, for example, has benefited quite a bit from the whole NFL thing with Colin Kaepernick and so on. Even though initially, when they announced that they were sponsoring him or taking him on as an endorser, their shares fell dramatically as the people who didn't agree with that position abandoned the company. But over time, my understanding is that their net gain is actually quite significant, so that more people came into the franchise because they took that stand than the number of people who left the franchise.
So I want to talk about the populations that are changing, but people don't understand that the marketing and the behavior changes with it. So, for example, forever we've been talking about millennials, and millennials do this and millennials don't do that, and millennials feel this way and millennials don't feel that way. And I work in academia, and I have to remind people that the millennials are almost 40 years old. They are no longer our students. They are now our faculty.
Yeah.
So everyone forgets to pivot to, now we have Gen Z, and they're getting much older also. So,
right.
People need to keep up, but we don't, because nobody's, outside of the marketing, nobody's really teaching us about the behaviors of all of these people. So we have all of these assumptions. So what are some of the things that we should know or avoid?
Well, that gets to what I was saying earlier on about putting people into these broad categories and thinking they're all the same. If you've got, you've got two, and those of you that teach like I do, you have two 20-year-old females from Philadelphia, whatever, sitting in your classroom. And I say this to my students when I'm teaching segmentation. I say, so you're all, because our university is very homogeneous, way too homogeneous. I say, well, you guys all pretty much fit into the same demographic category. So is it fair to say that you're all pretty much the same people? There's no difference among all of you. I'm looking at 30 kids. And of course, every one of them is having a fit because they think of themselves as each of them as being an individual. So if you've got, two millennials, or you've got, let's say, a 25-year-old and a 27-year-old, I'm not sure that they're going to be that similar. Now, having said that, there are certainly some dominant values and changes that we can pretty comfortably make. Guess what? They're digital natives, right? They've grown up on, yes, and that has a lot of implications for the way they shop and all of that, and we can talk about that. But really, there's probably more differences among them than there are similarities. So what you need to do is get into what we call microcultures, which are, might be, for example, a community that forms around a band. All of this outcry we're seeing about Britney Spears right now. I'm not quite sure why people are so upset about Britney Spears, but they are. All those Britney Spears fans form a community, what we call a brand community. And so that's a way that, you can assume that there are some similarities, because we know that they all at least love Britney Spears and they aren't happy about the way she's been treated. So what we want to do is look for behavioral differences rather than just attitudes. We want to see how people spend their leisure time. Are they on the basketball court, or are they playing chess? Those are very different. And so once we can identify an activity that's relevant to our business, and that's true for B2B as well. So in Tina's case, your company is going to be enormous by the time we're done here. So in that case, your clients might be people who all tend to attend a certain kind of conference, let's say, where they learn managerial shortcuts or something. That's obviously, good prospects for your business. So the thing to remember is the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. It's not 100% effective because we like to change things up. But if I don't know anything else about a person, you tell me what they did this week, I can make a reasonable guess about what they're going to do next week. And that's very different than just saying, well, you're Gen Z, so therefore you're this or that.
It's so interesting. There's so many things that you said, and I love talking to people who are from different fields, because I always feel that no matter how different and how diverse what we do in our everyday worlds, I think we're all just one big Venn diagram. And I think the overlap between what you said and some of my work, there are actually two things in our time chatting today. One is this need for these microcultures. So I have been on this soapbox regarding mentoring, how you should never assign mentors based on some random fact of where you went to school or your hometown or the fact that you both love the color blue. Because it's completely random, it's based on absolutely nothing, and it likely will not work. There has to be something deeper. You need to know the mentor, you need to know the mentee. And I really love the fact that you said that you need to really know your customer, which is the same type of thing. So what you're talking about in marketing really works in mentorship as well. The other thing that you talked about early on was that people really are doing something to reach the masses. And because they're trying to reach the masses, I think they're losing the people on the fringes, which are probably the people that you want to reach the most. And that's what I see with my work on high achievers. We're so busy at teaching to the middle and working toward the middle and aiming for the middle and managing to the middle that we're losing our high achievers. they're walking out the door. So it's the same, you need to customize. You need to customize the leadership, customize the management, customize the mentoring. Same exact thing as you're talking about with the customizing of the marketing and knowing your customer. Same. Absolutely. We're one big Venn diagram.
And probably because you and I are in the same business, even though you may on the surface we're not. But you're talking about building relationships and changing people and so on. And as as a social scientist, that's what we do. That's what you do. And you just giving someone a label. And we do this, by the way, there's even in science, there is this tendency there's some new concept, people don't know what it is, so they give it a label and then they move on to the next one. But just because, and then that's called the nomological fallacy, just that the idea that you've assigned something a name, therefore you understand it, is a very, very big mistake. Just because it's got some, sexy name attached to it. So,
or acronym.
Yeah, or an acronym.
We like our acronyms.
Acronyms, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it's all about remembering that these are even in marketing. And of course, a lot of people think marketing is a 4-letter word, but the true objective of marketing is to identify what people need to make their lives better and give it to them. And so, are there bad apples out there? Yes, there definitely are. But most marketers, I think, are quite sincere about this. And so, what I tell people is, look, if marketing is about satisfying needs, how can you do that if you don't know what the needs are? You're only assuming you know what the needs are. Yeah. So again, reach out and touch. And, it's true. I mean, obviously, mentorship is very much a one-on-one relationship, but you're probably dealing with hundreds or even thousands of people in your kind of ecosystem. And the temptation to apply labels is always there.
And what do you do when the labels change?
Well, that's the problem, because we assume that they won't change, but the reality is that they have to be revisited. And in our postmodern society where things change so rapidly, and the fashion cycles and so on change so rapidly compared to what they used to do, these changes are occurring sometimes on a daily basis. It's almost like we're chameleons.
So it's so interesting because we all have, as you said, so many identities. So if I had to give one label to any one of the people on the panel, I don't know which one would I choose. I mean, for Allison, would I say she's a pediatrician? Would I say she talks about the science of high performance? Would I say she talks about anxiety, a TEDx speaker? I mean, which label do I use? Does one have more weight than another? Right. And on any given day, is she more of one than the other? Yeah. So you're right. We are chameleons, I guess.
And we started at the beginning. You use the term personal branding. This is where a brand becomes so important, because a good brand is not just one meaning. A brand is kind of an umbrella of meanings. And and the brand architecture, the platform that the brand is built on, has to be built on these underlying values and characteristics that are not necessarily tangible, but all of your branding should come out of that. So if you're only, and Allison, I certainly don't mean to say you're only a pediatrician, but what I mean is if that's the only thing that you're going to tell people about yourself, that's fine. Then your brand can be children's medicine. But if it's something more than that, your brand has to expand. So a company like Starbucks that you mentioned before, their brand architecture, to give you an example, is what they call the third place. Their entire brand is built around a term they call the third place. And what that means is the original vision, when I think they've largely achieved it, is that we have 3 basic touch points in our life where we spend our time: home, work, and Starbucks. And so with a brand definition like that, you're not restricted to selling coffee, right? Anything that attracts people to the idea of spending several hours a day sitting in a Starbucks is part of your brand. So that can mean that you start to sell the music that they play. I think they sell the soundtracks. Well, that you might say, well, what does that have to do with coffee? Nothing. It has to do with the Starbucks brand, which is the experience of sitting, listening to music, and drinking your coffee in a third place.
I love that. I love that. Allison, were you going to chime in with something?
No, really. I was just thinking about all of the times in college when I would get a coffee and a bagel at Starbucks and write a paper for 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The experience of sitting in the Starbucks. It's not just about the coffee.
And that's what you're buying. And so, to get back to what you were saying before, my mantra, we don't buy things because of what they do. We buy them because of what they mean. So when people say, I can't believe someone would pay $4 for a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Now, I'm not saying that's a good idea, but my response would be they're not buying a cup of coffee at Starbucks. They're buying an experience at Starbucks that includes drinking Starbucks coffee. And that's very different.
Yeah. So, Michael, as we wrap this up, what are 3 take-home points that we should remember?
Well, let's see. Like I said, always try to know your customer. Don't just imagine what you think your customer would like. I guess another is don't rely on old-fashioned stereotypes to understand your customers or your clients, because those are changing very, very rapidly. And the third is, be open to these changes, because as soon as you understand them, they will change again. And so the importance, I'm talking to a group of academics, this is great. You understand when I say the importance of theory, what that means is that we have an underlying structure, and the overt parts of that may change depending on the year and so on. But if you have a solid and rigorous understanding of why people behave, you don't have to reinvent the light bulb every time.
Of it. So know your customer, don't rely on stereotypes, and be open to changes.
Yeah, and look at the big picture. What is really driving these behaviors? Because when someone buys a pair of blue jeans or a cup of coffee or consulting services, again, they're buying basically a whole package of benefits. They're not just buying
experience.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you. Michael, the name of your book again is The New Chameleons: How to Connect with Consumers Who Defy Categorization. Where can we get this? Everywhere?
Everywhere on Amazon, Kogan page, the usual suspects. Absolutely.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you. And Michael, if people want to learn more about your work, where can they go?
I have a website, which is just michaelsolomon.com, or drop me a line at michael@michaelsolomon.com.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wrapping up, Tina, where can people learn more about you?
Sure. They can go to LinkedIn. I'm at TP Sunshine. They can also go to our website, leadoutside-the-lines.com. And I look forward to hearing from people through those mediums.
Beautiful. Thank you. And Bruce, where can people learn more about you and see your great new haircut?
Oh, thank you. Well, I've learned after extensive market research that most of my customers are human. So if you are human and you can search on Google, Bruce Y. Lee, if you include the Y, that distinguishes it from someone else who's supposedly named Bruce Lee. And my website is brucewiley.com. You can search for my articles, Bruce Y. Lee Forbes, and on social, I'm at Bruce_Y_Lee. I should add just very quickly, Michael, that a lot of what you mentioned has a lot of crossover with a lot of things that we're doing in medicine and public health. Like, for instance, we had a precision nutrition NIH meeting earlier this year, and it's all the same principles, because the key, one of the movements in medicine is to get a better understanding of the differences, because there's too much like categorization in the past.
Right.
And say you are XYZ, therefore you should get this or be treated this way, et cetera. So it seems like this is part of a big movement in general across many fields.
Customized medicine, customized living, that's the future.
Precision. We're calling it precision medicine. Thank you, Bruce. And by the way, I vote for your word in your next Forbes article to be avatar.
Excellent.
That's a challenge. Allison's sound is a little bit off, but I think I know her well enough that I can say you can find Dr. Allison at Escalante at shouldStorm.com, which probably should have the link to her TEDx talk of the same topic, how to get free of the culture of criticism. And she calls it the should storm because it's how to take effective action under pressure as parents and professionals. I am Dr. Ruth Gotian. You can find me on all the social media, just my name, as well as my website, ruthgotian.com. Tomorrow's Forbes article is about how to get promoted. Michael, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and sharing your evening with us. This show is on all the platforms, and the audio from this is on the Mentor Project podcast, which will come out on Sunday. We really hope that you will subscribe and share and leave a rating and review so we can have great guests like Michael keep coming back and share their brilliance with us. Thank you and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.